What if you could use Zone 2 to improve your training sessions, but without necessarily targeting your endurance development? We often hear about the benefits of low intensity or Zone 2 training and what it does to your cardiovascular system, amongst others. But there's another way to use Zone 2 to improve your training in general. And this method can be used whether you practice a strength sport, a team sport, or even a hybrid sport like CrossFit or a combat sport. But first, let's review what Zone 2 training is and how it actually helps your body adapt and become more endurant. Zone 2 training is typically described as low intensity training, and it's typically done on a bike or running, something that's cyclical, continuous, and you're going to do that for anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes, sometimes much longer depending on the sport that you practice. But typically we talk about the benefits on the muscular system. So you're going to improve the endurance of your muscles. You're going to help your muscles use more oxygen by building more mitochondria, building more capillaries around your muscle fibers. It's going to help your cardiovascular system. It's going to build a bigger heart. It's going to help your arteries dilate and push more blood and more oxygen through. It's also going to help your hormonal system. It's going to help your nervous system. So the Zone 2 training really is going to affect every part of your body and is going to help develop your base endurance and your work capacity. But if we leave endurance development on the side for a second and we talk about training volume as a way to progress in your sport, we know that by training more, you will improve faster and you will become better. And that's true whether you practice an endurance sport like biathlon or a strength sport like weightlifting. The more you lift in the year, the better your results in competition. The more you train on the snow or on the bike, and the better your results in an endurance sport as well. But let's say you practice a high intensity sport like weightlifting or powerlifting. It's not necessarily easy to add an extra training session in your week. Let's say you're training 3 times a week, and whether you're practicing strength training or weightlifting, you might want to add a 4th training session in order to get better at your sport. But sometimes just adding that extra training session is going to push you over the edge, because you won't be able to recover, and adding that 4th session, which should have helped you become better at your sport, will actually negatively impact your other 3 hours in the week, and you're going to plateau or even move backwards instead of improving. And that's where Zone 2 training can be a nice middle step between where you are now in your training volume and where you want to get to in your next phase of development. So instead of going from 3 strength training sessions to 4 strength training sessions, well, you could do 3 strength plus 1 low intensity session, and then you can progressively transform this low intensity session into a strength session after a few weeks. So essentially, that low intensity session just serves as a placeholder and to help your body get used to that extra volume during the week, so that you can transition more smoothly from those 3 strength sessions to those 4 strength sessions. And this is going to work regardless of what kind of training you do. And it's going to be especially effective if your training is pretty demanding, is pretty hard on the metabolic system or on the nervous system. It is going to help you transition easier between that lower training volume up to those higher training volumes. It's also a great way to keep your volume high in case of an injury. Let's say that you practice CrossFit and you have a shoulder injury. So there's a bunch of sessions you won't be able to do. Part of your weightlifting is going to be limited. Your gymnastics works is going to be limited, but you don't want to just drop your training volume a whole bunch during your shoulder rehab. So you can use that Zone 2 as a placeholder for the sessions you would have done in other modalities otherwise, so that when you get back with a healthy shoulder, you can put that training back in without too much problems. Whereas if you had dropped from, let's say, 4 hours a week to 2 hours a week of training, when you're going to try and jump back up to 4, you might run into some recovery issues. So using that Zone 2, either to go from lower volume to higher volume, or to maintain your training volume during a recovery period or an injury, is a smart way to use this kind of session in your general training. Now, you also have to consider the fact that increasing your training volume is a really potent stimulus for your body and it is going to help you improve, but you don't want to overuse this lever and you want to essentially keep some of this extra volume for later. And let me give you a very simple example. A couple years ago, I was lucky enough to go do a training camp with French triathlete Sam Laidlow. And at the time, he was training between 21 and 23 hours per week, where some of his competitors, if we think about the Norwegians, trained upwards of 30 hours per week, sometimes 40 hours per week. But Sam and his dad and coach Richard knew that just because Sam could technically train 30 hours a week didn't mean that he had to. And by finding ways to improve with only 21 to 23 hours per week, they knew that they could keep leveraging that volume year after year by adding an hour, adding 2 hours, but without jumping too far ahead. Because if they had, they would have lost that possibility for progress over multiple years. So if you're improving currently with 4 sessions a week, then try to keep doing that until you stop improving with 4 sessions a week before you jump to 5 or even to 6 hours per week. So you want to use that progression of volume intelligently, and you don't want to jump ahead too far because like my colleague and good friend Kier Wenham Flat says, if you use advanced means of training with an athlete or a person that doesn't need them, in that case, the advanced means of training is excessive volume or a lot more volume than what they actually need, you rob them twice. You rob them of the very simple linear progress that they could get right now with a step-by-step increase in volume, and you rob them of the adaptations they would have gotten with that extra leverage down the line. So to keep it simple, only increase your training volume once what you're doing right now is no longer sufficient to get better. And you can use low intensity training as that placeholder, as that middle ground before you add another sports or another high intensity session in your training week. Now, if you want to learn more about endurance, I created a 4-video mini guide for you that you can find down in the description. If you have any questions, please leave them below this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.